talking about, when I heard about the theme beyond, immediately I thought about pushing beyond like what we think we're capable of. And that's kind of the theme of my life. It started, there's the mic. It started in high school for me when I realized that I had some social anxiety, and I was realizing that whenever I went to school, I would get this overwhelming sense of just overwhelm. I couldn't think straight. My mind would get in these looping patterns. I would get sweaty and lightheaded, and my heart would be racing, and I couldn't figure out why. Like, I just was like, I don't know, I guess I'm just a weirdo. And through pushing myself through like these experiences every day at school, it would always happen first period. And there was a short period of time when I would tell my parents, like, I can't go to school, but I couldn't explain what I was feeling or why I was feeling it. And so through that, just, my parents were like, well, you're not going to drop out of high school because you're uncomfortable. You're going to keep going. You have to go to school. So through this, I just started researching, what was going on with me. And I would notice I'd fall into these patterns when I was around big groups of people. And so part of me slowly decided that in order for me to get past whatever this was, I had to put myself in these uncomfortable situations. I would notice it would happen when I'd go to parties or when I'd be in big groups, after the football game or things like that. So I would put myself in these uncomfortable situations to push through whatever that uncomfortable feeling was. And soon enough, I got over it and I realized, okay, I get nervous when I'm in big groups of people and, it makes my heart race and I get lightheaded and I don't know why, but that's a thing that a lot of people experience. So pushing beyond that level of comfort, that's when I started to notice, like in retrospect, preparing to talk today, I was like, well, that's kind of where it started. Realizing that when I'm pushing myself beyond what I think I'm capable of, that's where growth happens. And so after high school, there we go. So after high school, the panic attacks and the social anxiety started to subside, and I got really into photography. And that's kind of where my creative journey started. And I realized I was really into taking portraits of people. And I think because my interest even with Sister House and how this all evolved, is I love feeling that human-to-human connection with people. And I think that happens from, empathizing with people or seeing parts of yourself in others, and seeing just the human connection that we all have, and the different things that we all go through, maybe at different times in our lives, but it's all something that is normal. And for me, questioning early on, why am I not normal? That took a lot for me to realize, okay, we're all a bunch of weirdos, and there's no such thing as normal. Yeah, college came and it was new and exciting, and I quickly got into this habit of, work. I had a job, I was doing full-time classes and trying to get good grades, and I had just moved out of the house for the first time and was partying every weekend, nonstop, and I just hit a wall. Out of nowhere, the panic attacks came back, and I had this really low just self-image. I knew I was worth something, but I lost my purpose. I didn't really see, I was still doing the art stuff, but I didn't really see what my purpose was. And I think that's something that when I, get into deep conversations with people, it comes up a lot. Every person has this experience once or several times where they just feel at a loss. They don't know where they're going. We feel stuck. And that's really how I felt. I was looking for, but not seeing my purpose. And again, decided, okay, what pattern do I see in my life that's leading me to feel this way? And depression and anxiety is something that I've dealt with since I was probably 12 or 13. But really at this time was one of the lowest points because I just didn't see Like, what am I good at? Oh, I'm not good at anything, you know? I can't, you know, put myself in certain situations and feel comfortable like most people do. Why is that? And this self-doubt. And really, that's when I started searching more for purpose. So I saw these habits, decided to quit drinking for a little while, and really just focus on balance and like finding, you know, I'm only 19 at the time, so I'm like, you know, I need to find some balance, not go partying every weekend, maybe see what am I good at. And that's where my exploration for things that would really make me uncomfortable in the past began. The first one started with traveling. So my senior year, I think it was my senior year of college, I decided to study abroad in Costa Rica. And my goal in doing that was to be able to go and travel. I really wanted to get out of town and put myself in a place that I was completely unfamiliar with, because what is scarier than moving to a country where you don't speak the language and you don't know anybody? But I brought a bunch of toy cameras with me and just different film cameras and one digital camera. And I was like, I'm just gonna go and learn Spanish, and I'm gonna do this side project of taking portraits of people. And I think I'm uncomfortable now asking people to take their portraits and connect with people on that level. But now I'm gonna go try and do it in Spanish, which I barely speak. So that was really fun. And there I really found that beyond just taking portraits, like life started to become more fun. Before, I feel like I really connected with life through photography. I would like the safety of being behind a camera. I'd go to a party or want to talk to somebody, but I had no real like starting conversation, but it would always be, oh, hey, I do freelance photography, or I'm taking a photography class, can I take your photo? And that was always the intro of how I would get to know new people. And so there I really became comfortable with actually like putting my camera down and experiencing things for myself, and realizing that I didn't need to hide behind this camera all the time. So after Costa Rica, I pretty much decided, I know I love traveling now. I want to continue traveling. I want to continue doing photography. And all throughout college, I had a part-time job working with kids with autism. So I was working in-home with young kids, teaching. At first, it started as a behavioral therapy thing that a lot of like high school and college students get a job. It's called ABA. And you're working with kids with autism to teach them social norms and things like that. So when I was finishing college, I had just gone into early intervention, where I was working with like 18-month-old to 3-year-olds with autism and teaching their parents more how to communicate effectively with their kids, and teaching the families about autism. And it wasn't so much of the behavioral stuff with the kids because they were so little. So from that, I decided, okay, when college is over, what are my options? I want to get out of Vegas, like for good now. Where am I going to go? So I had been to Santa Cruz when I was like 13. And it's funny because my mom found a couple years ago a list of like 7 things that I wrote in 6th grade of things I wanted to accomplish in life. And one was to own my own business. Another one was to move to Santa Cruz. And there was like another one, like be a photographer or something. All things that I don't know why I put those in there at the time, but they ended up panning out over time. So when I had been to Santa Cruz and I really wanted to move there, I knew that there was like a large hippie population and a lot of wandering types of people, great for portraits. So I proposed to a camp up there for adults with special needs that I could be their photographer. I had been doing a little bit of volunteer work here in town with different nonprofits, doing photography for them. And I'd always say, oh, well, like whatever your budget is, I'd work with you. And I'd always get, well, we don't have a budget for photography, but you can do it for free if you want. So I'd do that. So I proposed to this camp. I'm like, I'll come and take the pictures and like put them on your website and help you. And they were just like, oh yeah, no, you can do that for fun if you want, but we actually need like people to actually work with our clients. So I ended up seeing that as my out. In the same week of graduating from UNLV, I moved up to Santa Cruz, and I was like, I'm just gonna live on this like commune camp style place and work with adults with special needs. And to my like surprise, and it was lucky for me, as soon as I moved up there, their art director at the camp decided she was totally overwhelmed, and she sought me out and she's like, do you want this job? Because I will switch you. You can take over the art program. Like, it's all yours. I feel like you'd be more into it. And so from there, I started working with people with special needs, primarily Down syndrome, but all different types of challenges and disabilities, and of all ages, which is something that in my mind I was thinking like, hey, I've got a free ticket to Santa Cruz, and like I'm familiar with this kind of work, and I get to combine working with people with disabilities with art, which is like, I'd always thought I'm somehow going to merge those two passions, but I wasn't sure how that was going to work. And this allowed me that. When I got there, I realized that, working at this camp was great, but it's a summer camp and it ends after 3 months. So after doing endless gardening projects and something I called musical feet, where we dip our feet in paint and turn on music and dance all over a giant canvas, like things like that were just wild and you'd never get away with in a school setting. Doing things like that, I realized that going back to normal life there, finding a place to live, finding a day job, that was a little bit more challenging. So as soon as camp ended, I got 3 jobs and was like, this is how I'm gonna make it work. I don't really know anybody. Everyone who works at this camp, they work there for the summer, and then after the summer's over, they go back to wherever they're from. So I had maybe one friend in Santa Cruz. And I was like, that's okay. Like I'm, going beyond that level of comfort. I'm gonna put myself in this, new place. I'm gonna start new jobs, and I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna live by the beach, and I'm good. So I start working this job, or these 3 jobs, and I'm working over 60 hours a week, doing really hard jobs. I was caregiving for a woman with dementia, a little girl with cerebral palsy, and then I was working in their school district as a one-on-one aide. And in between that, riding my bike, and just partying on the weekends again, falling into that habit with the new friends that I'd made, and realized quickly, like I just totally burned out. So around the time of this burnout, I hit what I call like my turning point or my awakening. So I was working all these hours. I've had panic attacks before, but I've never had an anxiety attack, and I didn't really think like, oh, what's the difference between the two? It's like, it's the same, But one night I had an anxiety attack that was so real to the point where I just could not get my mind to stop. And I don't know if anyone's ever experienced this, but it was the most terrifying thing that I've ever gone through, because I literally didn't know if my mind would ever stop looping in this terrible thought process, to the point of where I called my mom and I said, I don't know how to make my brain stop. Like I am debating, like I've never felt really suicidal, but I can see why people kill themselves. Like I'm ready to run into the ocean and, be done, because I'm sick of this anxiety and depression. I have good times and bad times, and it's ups and downs, and I just couldn't find stability. And luckily my family is super supportive. My mom said, go to the nearest hospital, tell them what's going on, be around people, don't be alone. I'm getting you a ticket home. You come back to Vegas, whatever. So I came back and didn't tell anybody I was here. I was so embarrassed. I didn't want my brother and sister to know. I didn't want my friends to know. And I was here for maybe a week or 2 and just couldn't be alone. And I had never had that before. I'd gone through bouts of depression, but I'd never been to the point where I couldn't be by myself. And so that was the turning point where I really felt, okay, I've seen now what the end looks like, and it doesn't look good. And I'm young. I was like 22 at that time. And I thought, I'm here for a purpose. So I absolutely need to find what that purpose is, and I'm going to live it. And like, whatever that looks like, that's what I'm going to do. And so I went back to Santa Cruz, still terrified, but pushing myself into that uncomfortable place of going to therapy and, quitting drinking and just telling people, actually, I'm doing this for myself. I had a group of friends that I was living with. We lived in this big house in Santa Cruz with a giant backyard. We had the biggest backyard in Santa Cruz, which I later found out was because the original owners had owned ostriches. And so we had all these blocks of cement that we didn't know what they were for. And then we made friends with a landscaping guy, and he's like, oh yeah, this house. Yeah, this is the ostrich house. These used to be giant cages. So we had this great house. And one of the roommates had built a sauna in the back, and we had bees and a garden, and we're growing our own food. And I just thought, this is more what life is about. I'm sick of the day-to-day, like, oh, I'm just working to get to the weekend, and I was enjoying the work that I was doing, but I was also burning myself out, and I didn't want to face that. And I wasn't having authentic relationships with people. Things were very surface level, and what I realized through this process of transformation in myself was I had to be really honest with people and tell them, actually, I don't want to go out till 3 a.m, but I'll, ride my bike to the bar and I'll hang out for an hour, and then I'll ride my bike back and then go to sleep by midnight so I can wake up early the next morning and volunteer, which was something I had been saying I wanted to do for years, but just couldn't get myself to wake up early enough because I had been out all night, the night before. So after this, it was like 3 or 4 months of me just really focusing on healing. I quit 2 of those jobs. I continued working with the little girl with cerebral palsy. And she lived about an hour away. And what I would do is I'd have to drive up Highway 1. And I would just focus on that drive, thinking about all the things that I was grateful for. And praying and meditating on different things that I wanted to see happen in my life, and things that I'd said I wanted to do, or things that I imagined that I could do with my life, but that I wasn't brave enough before to go for, or thought I was good enough for. And so, oddly enough, which I don't think it's a coincidence, I had been saving to go on this trip to Europe with one of my friends, and I had saved a couple $1,000s. And when I had this awakening, I was like, well, now I've got like $4,000 that I don't, know what to do with. And through one of these groups that I was going to through my healing process, I met a woman who said, hey, I've got this volunteer trip coming up to Haiti, and, it's in 3 weeks, and we still need like a couple more volunteers, like if anyone's interested. And I was like, well, I'm interested. Like, I want to, any excuse. My passport's still valid. And I was still in that space of feeling terrified of going out of the country, especially because I was still healing from all the trauma from a couple months before. But I knew to grow, I have to push myself beyond that level of comfort and through the fear. I'm sick of living in fear that something's going to happen, that the next panic attack is. And then I really worked on with my therapist, okay, so what if? He's like, what if you get there and you have a panic attack? You've had 100 before. And I'm like, oh, you're right. I guess it's not that scary. So that's kind of the way I think, and I still think of that to this day when I get anxious about stuff. Even last night, I'm thinking, oh no, how am I going to do that talk in the morning? And I'm like, so what? Maybe it's not great. Whatever. Life goes on, So going to Haiti was a super spiritual experience, and also just really special in terms of showing myself I am capable of doing things that make me uncomfortable, that I have feared, but they're absolutely worth doing, and they're 1,000 times more meaningful because I had to work to get there. So took some portraits in Haiti. This was one of my favorites. And after I came back from Haiti, I was in Santa Cruz for a couple more months and then was offered to move in with the little girl that I had been caring for. So the family that I was working for, they lived up in the middle of the Redwoods, about 45 minutes south of San Francisco. And they had this old barn, which I didn't realize had actually been like a quarter of it turned into an apartment. And they're like, do you want to live in the barn? Emma, the girl that I was caring for, she had started getting really sick, and we couldn't figure out what was going on with her. She was 12 at the time and just started having these vomiting episodes where anytime we'd put food in her G-tube, because she was G-tube fed, she would vomit. So we thought, okay, maybe she has a food allergy she's developing as she goes through puberty, something like that. And I won't go into all the details, but long story short, Emma, her system was shutting down. A lot of kids with cerebral palsy and the extreme medical issues that she had, when they go through puberty, your body's changing and growing, and her body just couldn't change and grow with her. So her mom asked me to move onto the property, and I was kind of at a place where I thought, okay, what's more uncomfortable than like moving up to the middle of nowhere, like no locks on the doors, the middle of the woods. It's quiet. I'm from a city, So I was like, you know what? Like, this is my purpose. My purpose right now in life is caring for Emma. So yeah, I'm going to move to the barn. So I end up moving to this barn, that little white building you can see, just literally in the middle of nowhere. But it was awesome because I really got to connect more with myself and with Emma, and Emma was nonverbal. So part of my continued healing was, and growth, like the most growth that I've ever had, besides that awakening time, was working with Emma and learning just how to communicate with somebody without words. Emma and I, this is Emma, we would spend the last year of her life, we spent in the house. Luckily, her stepdad was a doctor, so we got the okay from Stanford Hospital to set up her room as a hospital room. So we did crafts all the time. I was like, what am I good at? I'm good at like making stuff. That's what I do for fun. So the view from the barn, I would bring her over and we'd have tea parties in the morning. We would go on Pinterest and look up like Dr. Seuss tea party. Okay, then we'd spend 3 weeks making, all these different crafts for Dr. Seuss tea party. Then we'd go and make, Valentine's Day would be coming and we'd buy felt and, batting and make little Valentines for her friends at school and send them to her school. So that whole year, I really had a lot of, it was the most heartbreaking year, but also the biggest year of growth because it seems like it would have been something that would be so uncomfortable. And there were definitely times that it was too much to bear. But what I found was that when you're creating things, especially creating together, it's healing for everybody involved. I didn't even realize I still had more healing to do until I was with Emma and we're, surrounded by IVs and medications, and every 30 minutes we have to check levels of different, but we're creating things together, and that gave her some sense of normality. So back to my notes. So yeah, living there, again, like pushing me beyond what was uncomfortable. I was really challenging myself. And yeah, just going for walks and not being in a place where I didn't have great cell service. And if it was cloudy, like the TV didn't work, so different things like that. The internet sucked. So I really had time with myself to see like, what is my true purpose beyond like what comes after this? Because I knew that Emma was not going to be living for much longer. And my whole time in California, I had been caring for her either part-time and then full-time. And at that point, I was living with them, and I knew that my purpose was going to change, and that in every, life season, your purpose doesn't have to be the same your whole life. It can be something that changes. So while I was up there, I was reading a lot, and up on my Amazon, books you might like to read one day, popped up a book called Not for Sale, and it was about human trafficking, and human trafficking specifically in the US, and how it just goes under our noses. And when I read this book, it blew my mind. So between Santa Cruz and San Francisco, there are all these farms on Highway 1, and there's all these migrant workers. And I'd always wondered, and I'd heard from different photographers, because again, I was into portraiture, and I was volunteering with the homeless in Santa Cruz, doing portraits for them and stuff. And I asked this woman, what's up with these migrant workers on the coast? And she told me that she could go there to deliver food to them, but that they wouldn't allow her to bring her camera. And I'm like, well, who won't allow you? And she's like, the farmers. And I'm thinking, these are huge farmers that are producing crops that we probably buy at the grocery store. And they won't allow you onto their farm, which is right 10 minutes away from these multi-million-dollar properties, because they don't want you to see the conditions that their workers are living in. So she told me she had been into some of these houses and just how terrible the conditions were. There were sometimes non-working bathrooms, 12 people, kids included, living in a one-room cottage kind of. And I'm thinking, what? This is white privilege. And that was one thing when I moved to Santa Cruz that was really weird, was I was like, everybody's white. In Vegas, we got everybody, and everybody's friends, and everybody's cool. In Santa Cruz, everybody is white. And if you're not white, there's a big population of Mexican people. And one of the families that I worked for, the son came home from school. He was in 6th grade one day, and he goes, I'm going to have to go to middle school next year, and there's a lot of Mexican kids at that school. And I said, so? And he's like, well, And I'm like, you know what? At this time, it was 2013 or 14, and I'm like, what is this kid talking about? I had never been exposed to, in my adult life, a child being a little bit afraid to be with another ethnicity of people at their school. So that was shocking to me. But during this time, I realized, there's a lot of these things that happen right under our noses that I wasn't really even paying attention to until I had read this book and became a little bit more aware. So that's where my interest in human trafficking came in. When Emma passed, I had decided to go to Thailand. And I was traveling with one of my friends who I met in Costa Rica, who has become one of my best friends. And at the time, I had been saving to go to South America and go backpacking alone. And when I told her what was going on with Emma and just how, I was having all these feelings, and I didn't, I thought, I want to go backpacking in South America. I'm going to go alone. Do you want to come? And she's like, well, actually, I just bought my ticket to Thailand, if you want to come with me. And it was the same month. So I was like, well, I've been reading a lot about human trafficking. I'm really interested in Cambodia in particular because it's the sex trafficking hub of the world for children. And I want to work in rehabilitation for them. I said, I need to get out of California. I want to go to Cambodia and live there and work in rehabilitation somehow creatively, and I'm like, the last year it's been all about creative healing. And I think that's my thing, creating and, getting people together for the purpose of healing. So we go to Thailand and Cambodia, and I had been really searching for a specific nonprofit to work with, or maybe I'll start my own, little group where we make crafts and somehow, sell them here in the US. And what I found was in Cambodia, people were making beautiful, beautiful stuff, especially things out of recycled material. And then they're selling them in towns like Phnom Penh, which are so poor. And and the people traveling there, I mean, nobody's going there for a vacation. If you're traveling to Phnom Penh, you're going there for the sex industry, or maybe to, if you're, I guess, into history and you want to learn about the Khmer Rouge, but that's it. So when I was there, I just had this like enlightening moment of, these people are making beautiful, beautiful things. There are these rehabilitation projects in place, but they're not selling to people who have money or who want to support this kind of stuff. And that's where the idea for Sister House started. So from there, I made a little note. I wanted to put this in the slideshow. But again, reminding myself, like, having these thoughts, what if it fails? What if I don't succeed? What if I move back to Vegas and try to start this business and it doesn't work? But I knew, like, I got to do it. If I don't do it, I'm going to be wondering about it. So I had this quote that I can barely read, even with my glasses on. No one has life figured out because life is not man-made. Whether you believe in science or divine power, it can be agreed that no man created life, nor can solve all of its okay, I gotta get closer. Complexities. Both sides trust in someone other than ourselves. So kind of this idea that, like, nobody's got it figured out. All these people that I admire who have started social impact companies, and what I know of now, like the language to describe that is called a social impact company. They didn't have it figured out. They just knew, like, I have this draw to help these people. I have this skill. I'm going to put those together, and they're doing it. And so from there, I didn't mention, when I moved from Emma's house, I felt like I needed to get rid of everything. And so I got rid of almost everything in my little apartment, and I drove back to Vegas, put stuff in storage by my parents' house, and I thought, okay, whenever I come back from Cambodia, whether it's 9 months or a couple years, I'll have stuff to start over. Well, I was only gone for like 2.5 months. So I came back and I was like, Mom, can I stay on your couch? So I had this idea for Sister House and what it could be. And in my mind, I thought, okay, where am I going to get the money to start a company that sells these goods from these women? So I had been backpacking. I bought really small things, like 10 really small things from these social impact groups who were working with, one was working with not only survivors of sex trafficking, but people in Cambodia with disabilities, because there it's a really taboo thing and those people are shunned from society. So I was really into the idea of this. I brought back these things and I called my sister Carly, she's in the back, and I was like, hey, I have this crazy idea, or we were on Skype. I'm like, I'm gonna get a ticket home to Vegas. I'm gonna live there for a while. And do you wanna start this company with me, like selling things that we make, and then ultimately talking to people about human trafficking and sex trafficking and deeper issues, but through, like, creatively. Like, when someone sees something beautiful, that opens up the conversation for, hey, that was made by a survivor of blah, 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 and tell their story for them. I'm like, these people, unfortunately, they're making really cool stuff, and there's people doing really awesome rehabilitation projects with them, but it's there in Cambodia, and it's not getting, I'm like, in Vegas, we buy things, like, what do we do in the summer? We go out to eat and we go shopping, It's like, there are people with money that could really appreciate this type of work and know that they're giving back. Do you want to do this with me? So that's kind of where we started. And when I came back to Vegas, I was staying on my mom's couch, and my friend in Arizona called me, and she's like, hey, I just heard of this job that's opening, and it's a job doing chemical inventory at hospitals, like all through the Pacific Northwest. Do you want to take it? You'd be gone like 3 weeks a month, and you'd get to go to Portland for a couple months, Seattle, like the Tri-Cities, a couple places in Montana, California. And I was like, absolutely. Like, what skills do you need? And she's like, can you use an iPhone? And I was like, yes. So for 8 months, I traveled like 3 weeks out of the month from here. And when I'd come back, I would do pop-ups with my sister, and I put a picture in here. of like one of our first pop-ups. We did First Friday, and Carly would make hanging planters out of like scrap material and stuff and plant succulents, and we would teach people about caring for succulents, and I would make different like things. When I lived up in the barn, I started making everything because I was like, I got so much time. I'm gonna make my own soap and my own, shampoo, and so I'm selling stuff like that. And that's how we generated enough money to buy our first like partnership with a social impact company. So during those 3 weeks of the month when I was traveling, my friend who lived in Arizona ended up getting the job with me. So we were traveling together, and every day after work, we'd get off work at like 2 or 3, and we would seek out different small independent businesses and just go and like pop in. And I would just take notes. Like, I didn't go to school for business or for branding or marketing or anything. So I was all about just like researching what these small business owners were doing, especially in Portland, because their city is like so supportive of that kind of work. But I'm like, these people literally, like, there was a place that I used to go to in San Francisco that this woman collected vintage kitchen gadgets and had a store in San Francisco, all vintage kitchen stuff. And I'm like, how does she pay the rent? Like, you're in downtown San Francisco, but like, you're really into vintage kitchen stuff. Like, okay, well, I'm really into like products that give back to people. Like, how do I make that happen in Vegas where, if we're gonna be talking about sex trafficking happens here all the time. How do we open up that conversation in a creative way and an approachable way? So during those travels, learned a lot about branding, and just like, it was more of encouragement to myself. Like, okay, people are doing this everywhere. Like, this can happen in Vegas. I don't know of anything happening like this, but I want to be, if I'm going to be the first one, like, then fine, like, I'll do it. So again, pushing myself beyond that level of comfort, pushing through the fear, and just, trying to bring something here that is different, and that brings people together. So from Sister House, when it started 2 years ago, now it's become something totally different, but still, my main focus is to get people connecting on a deep level. We have now in this space resident artists. So we have 5 different artists that work from here, can sell from here, and it just promotes collaboration. Like, we've only been in this space for 2 weeks, but when people come and they're like, hey, I just got coffee at Public Us, like, can I hang out? And I'm like, yeah, go for it, And then we end up talking about things that actually matter, and not just like, oh, did you see this new, thing that's for sale on whatever. It's actually, I found people in Vegas who are really all about conscious, and responsible shopping, consumerism. Kelly taught me a word that I really like to use, or a phrase, consumer advocacy. So talking to people about knowing where the things you buy come from and who they're supporting. And just, really I'm focused on community more than competition, and collaboration instead of competition. I recently heard that down here there's going to be another kind of like maker space opening up, and someone was like, aren't you nervous? And I'm like, no, because I think it's great. Like, people should be creatively working together and idea sharing, and it opens up like real meaningful, true, authentic friendships and relationships in the community with different artists. And everyone has a creative side, so I love Creative Mornings, because I truly believe like any person can be creative, and there's so much healing in creativity, and like healing that we don't even realize we need sometimes that comes out of that. So that is the long version of how I got here. And I'm really glad you guys all came, and thank you.